Welcome back to the second episode of this 3-video series dedicated to the management of out-of-gas scenarios. Before diving forward into this topic, let's have a brief recap of what we have seen in the previous video. Being out of gas is the most frequent known cause of diving fatalities. Surprisingly, statistics show that many accidents happen even when divers are simply low on gas. The buddy breathing method, which involves divers alternatively breathing through one regulator, was too dangerous and has been discontinued, and the addition of a second regulator permits both divers to breathe from the same cylinder. The basic configuration of a set of regulators provides that one hose is longer than a normal one. The two main decisions divers must make in such scenarios are from which regulator of the donor the receiver will breathe, and which diver is in charge of grabbing or passing this chosen regulator. And while we left the answer to grabbing or passing question for this video, in the previous one we said that logic states that divers engaged in this stressful scenario should choose the least stressful solution. It also suggests that the donor is under less stress than the diver who is out of gas, or even just low on it. Having at least one diver always being able to breathe normally should reduce the level of stress that the team is undergoing. This means receiver breathes through the alternative source of the donor, allowing also more freedom of movement and swim thanks to the longer hose. Even though it is not part of any learned procedure, reality has shown that the diver more prompt to act usually leads the sharing procedure, leaving the other to accept it, unless there is a big difference between the training of the two divers.
After this brief recap, let's finish exploring the available options for a scenario in which a diver is low or out of gas. In the previous video we left off with this question. Is the donor physically offering one of her regulators, or does the receiver have to take it himself? Who has to manage the alternative source of gas? Unfortunately, we will not be able to arrive to a definitive answer. But we have at least to point out the potential advantages available for divers. So, let's continue our exploration of the sharing gas skill.
The receiver that grabs the alternative gas source by himself was one option practiced in many basic courses for many years. The donor just had to facilitate the receiver by positioning the alternative gas source where it would be easily detectable and accessible. And in this other video, we can see how this ability to grab the needed regulator could have helped to prevent a potential disaster. We have an expert diver and a much less experienced one who runs out of gas. What interests us is that even when the diver in trouble realizes that his buddy did not understand the seriousness of the situation, and even when he was still reachable by extending an arm, he did not try to grab his alternative gas source by himself. This resulted in a controlled emergency swimming ascent by the diver in trouble. This option, open and even close all the scenarios in which the receiver is leading the sharing gas procedure, grabbing by himself the new source of gas, which can be only the buddy's alternative gas source. In fact, an option in which the receiver grabs the main dive buddy's regulator, taking it out from the donor's mouth, is not even an option. It is simply something that should not happen, which can put both divers in trouble.
On the contrary, a receiver that breathes through the main regulator of the donor is one of the numerous available options in which the donor himself is in charge of deciding which regulator the receiver will breathe from. To clarify, while the receiver cannot grasp the buddy's main regulator, the donor might still decide to offer it. The first of these possible scenarios is a variation of an already discussed one. In this case, after the donor had offered her main reg to the receiver, she starts breathing from the alternative gas source integrated into the BCD corrugated. It is not a very popular solution, but possible, with almost no differences for the receiver. What will be difficult to manage is the scenario when a diver out of gas has difficulty attracting the attention of the potential donor. In this case, the diver in trouble could have been tempted to grab the regulator himself, which will probably be the one in use by the donor, and the donor might find herself suddenly without a regulator. The diver in trouble had no other choice because there was no other available regulator, and the one integrated with the BCD inflator was not easily reachable, and definitely not the first thought of most divers.
A more popular solution is to adopt part of the Hogarthian configuration used by the tech divers, which involves the use of the present-day famous long hose. In this scenario, the donor using this particular configuration will offer the reg with the long hose, which is her main one, and then switch to her alternative gas source with a short hose. In the pure Hogarthian configuration, this alternative gas source is tied securely to the donor's neck, making it difficult to be used by the receiver. In a perfect world, this is the right way to use this configuration. But in the imperfect one of sharing gas, there is of course a variation.
You may have seen a dive master using the Hogarthian configuration during a normal recreational dive. To understand why a dive master decides to use a configuration thought to be used in a completely different scenario, you have to think as a dive master does. First of all, almost always, divers run out of gas due to poor personal training, knowledge and decisions, the perfect description of an inexperienced diver. We are talking about a diver who has already made a dangerous mistake, and could soon make other dangerous mistakes, even in the same dive. You have to think as a dive master to be able to evaluate the available options, good or bad, as they are. And we do not need to bother with a run out of gas scenario. A simple low on gas one can easily serve us. First option, take the whole group of divers up to the surface, calling the end of the dive. Many divers might become upset, and a potential complaint might await the dive master at the diving center.
Second option, instruct the diver who is low on gas and his buddy to start the procedures to end the dive by themselves. This should be the normal solution, but we are looking at two divers, where at least one is low on gas and is probably not experienced. These divers have to ascend to the surface and then safely swim to the boat or beach, all alone. A dive master, aware that this is not a perfect world, will in many cases be nervous about this option, sometimes even more nervous than about a complaint awaiting at the diving center.
Third option, offer the diver in trouble the long hose reg, keep diving, ascend a little, and, if necessary, cut a little bit on the dive length. If all works as it is supposed to, everybody will be happy enough, and a debriefing should close this adventure. Maybe even without letting the diving center manager know about it. As said, good or bad as they are, those are the available options in this imperfect world. And the last of these options is the reason why dive masters adopt the Hogarthian configuration, often without being trained in it.
Still, in our imperfect but realistic world, divers not specifically trained have also decided to adopt the Hogarthian configuration too, just because they have seen dive masters or more expert divers adopting it. At any step along this path, the level of the training received drops in quality until the hypothetical advantages will succumb to the real disadvantages. Two inexperienced divers breathing from a single tank might quickly empty it, while the more freedom of movement offered by this configuration might give a false sense of a normal and under control situation. And of course, wild imaginations have been applied to this option, creating options of the option. Someone may use the Hogarthian configuration like has been taught, fixing the long hose around the upper body and neck, and breathing from this long hose reg, which is also used as the alternative source of gas in case of necessity. Other divers might fix the long hose along the tank. In this case, they may decide to use the long hose reg as both the main reg and the alternative gas source, if necessary. While other divers might decide to use the long hose reg exclusively as alternative gas source, keeping the short hose reg as the main one.
We started this video trying to answer to this question. Who have to manage the alternative gas source? Is the donor that has to offer it, or is the receiver that has to grab it? Even though, as said, a definitive answer it is probably impossible to be given, let's us at least discuss these two extremes. The first. The donor immediately realizes the seriousness of the situation, and between the two divers, there is a bit of distance to be covered before sharing becomes possible. In this case, the donor has enough time to prepare the alternative gas source, saving time, and maybe nipping in the bud the receiver's temptation to grab from the donor's mouth the main regulator. The other extreme. The donor does not recognize the seriousness of the situation. In this case, unless to swim to the surface, applying all what we have learned in this regard, the diver's in trouble has to grab the regulator of the donor, which he did not even understand to be a donor. Hopefully for both divers, the receiver will grab the alternative gas source, leaving the donor breathe through her main one.
After discussing all the options in the gas-sharing scenarios, the only thing left is the self-help. This option involves an extra amount of gas carried by the diver in trouble himself. We are talking about a redundancy source, a second tank equipped with a regulator completely independent of the main one, and probably containing the same type of gas contained in the main tank. We can call it a pommy tank, a side tank, or whatever. We can carry it in a pocket attached to the main one or on a diver's side. But the most important thing is its size. If it is too small, it will be useless in many situations. If it is big enough, it can serve us as an emergency system, as well as, with some extra safety considerations, it can permit divers to get more fun at adventures from their dives. Learning how to carry a second tank is something that can be easily done by most divers without much effort, and some of the options to carry this extra tank do not require a new BCD or a huge financial investment. Till now, we have seen the available options to manage an out-of-gas scenario. The next step is to arrive at some conclusions that can serve us while diving. For this, see you in the next video.
Thank you for watching. Please find in the description of this video the link to the other episodes of this series. Remember that by clicking on the bell and by subscribing, you will be informed about new videos. While by sharing and giving a like to this video, you will help to spread greater awareness among divers.